The Battle of Gangut took place on 27 July Jul, the 7th of August 1714 Greg, during the Great Northern War, in the waters of Rilahti Bay, north of the Hanko Peninsula, near the site of the modern-day city of Hanko, Finland, between the Swedish Navy and Imperial Russian Navy. It was the first important victory of the Russian fleet in its history. Name of the battle. The word Gangut in the name of the battle is a romanization of, which is the traditional Russian Cyrilization of Hangoud, the traditional Swedish name of the Hanko Peninsula. Seldom used names are Battle of Hango and Battle of Hangoud. The battle took place in the Rilax Bay north of the Hanko Peninsula. In Sweden and Finland, the battle is therefore known as the Battle of Rilax. It is also known in some sources as the Battle of Ahvenanmaa, the Finnish name of the Åland Islands which Russia seized after its victory. Background. The Russian Tsar Peter I had begun his offensive in Finland in the spring of 1713. The Russian armies quickly advanced all the way to Turku on the southwestern coast of Finland, and with Russian victory in Battle of Storkira on 19 February 1714 left southern Finland fully in Russian control. The Russian governor in Finland, Prince Mikhail Galitzina, with his headquarters in Turku, was unable to receive support by sea, which was then far more important than land-based support, as Swedish battle fleet under Admiral Gustaf Watrang had started blockading the coastal sea route past Hanko Peninsula already on 24 April. While it also blockaded the Russian supply route, the blockade also prevented the Russian coastal fleet from reaching Sweden and raiding the Swedish coast. First Russian transports left from Helsingfors in early May but had to stop east of Hango to Ekenäs, from where the supplies needed to be hauled overland. Russian attempts to provide ships to west of Hango ended when newly formed Swedish coastal squadron led by Captain Anton Wrangel intercepted the Russian supply ships south of Turku on 10 May, and in one-sided engagement sunk most of them while the rest were scattered. Admiral Apraksin's fleet was sent from its base at Kronstadt by the Tsar to open these service lines. Arrival at Hanko. When the 80-ship-strong Russian galley fleet arrived near the peninsula on 29 June 1714, they were met by a strong Swedish naval fleet consisting of 16 ships of the line and 7 smaller ships under the command of Admiral Watrang. Apraksin decided to withdraw his ships farther away to the eastern side of the peninsula and call for reinforcements while he waited for the further 20 galleys to arrive from Helsingfors, where they had been over the winter. The majority of the troops in Turku were moved according to his request to the peninsula. A plea for help was also sent to the Tsar, who was with the rest of the Baltic fleet in Reval. Admiral Apraksin specifically let the Tsar know that he should come personally to lead the attack. Russian battle fleet of 10 ships of the line and 6 frigates was originally intended to participate of a breakthrough attempt at Hango, but upon inspecting the fleet, Tsar found it ill-prepared for battle and abandoned the use of the battle fleet. Further, he ordered that fleet should not engage unless it would have clear superiority in artillery. Peter I reached the Russian coastal fleet on 20 July. The breakthrough. The first attempt in breaking through the Swedish lines was made by attempting to pull the galleys over the peninsula. The friction was reduced using ox skins between the ground and the ships. The first galley was successfully pulled over with much trouble, but the second was damaged, and the attempt was subsequently abandoned. However, Admiral Watrang had been informed of the Russians' attempt, and he sent a small naval detachment consisting of 11 ships led by Shoutbynicht Nils Ehrenskiöld to intercept the Russians. Swedish efforts forced Russians to abandon their plans few days later. Ehrenskiold's detachment consisted of following ships. The second attempt by the Russians took advantage of the calm weather on the morning of 26 July, the day of St. Pantaleon. The small galleys were easily maneuvered, whereas it was exceedingly difficult to try to turn the heavy Swedish battleships in such a weather. Apraksin initially sent 20 small galleys which succeeded in running the blockade, and then as Swedes started towing their sailing ships further out to sea with rowing boats, he sent 15 further galleys to the same route, though the second group had to go much further around since Swedes had moved away from the immediate vicinity of the coast. With Watrang's fleet moved outwards in an attempt to block the Russian breakthrough, the Russians started their blockade run on early hours of the 27th of July along the now clear sea route just alongside the Cape. Despite a frantic Swedish efforts to stop the Russians, only few of the Swedish ships reached firing range, and even then their artillery fire had very little effect. Only one galley was lost when it ran aground. Now only Ehrenskjold's small coastal squadron stood between Russian coastal fleet and the maze-like archipelago of Åland in southwestern Finland. The battle. After the breakthrough, Russian galleys were gradually pushing Ehrenskjold's detachment back, who in turn ordered his vessels to form a defensive line between two islands. One of the scary boats was scuttled in order to narrow down the area where the fight would take place with obstacles. The largest Swedish ship, the Pram Elefanten, was positioned broadside onto the approaching Russian vessels. 3 galleys were stationed end on each side, with the boats behind the line. After Ehrenskjold refused to surrender, the Russian fleet attacked on the 27th of July 1714 at 1400. The Russian galleys, commanded by the Tsar, attacked twice but were thrown back. The third time, when attacking with reinforcements and a combined force of about 95 galleys, the Russians managed to reach the Swedish ships and engage in close-quarters combat where superior Russian numbers could be used to their advantage. Russians managed to board the Swedish galley far left in the line, the Tranen, which capsized and sank, creating a hole into the Swedish line. Russian galleys made use of the opening and were quickly able to start boarding the rest of the Swedish ships. Fighting lasted for 3 hours as Swedes defended all of their ships, with fighting ending to the capture of Elefanten, where Admiral Ehrenskjold himself was taken prisoner of war on the deck of his own flagship. Russian galleys were different designs from Swedish galleys, and while carrying generally inferior artillery, 2 6-pounder guns per galley, they had larger crew complements, usually close to 200 men per galley. The Russians substantially outnumbered the Swedish, according to some sources 15 to 1. The Russian superiority in the battle was such that there wasn't even enough room for all the Russian vessels to fight at once. Consequences. While the defeat of the small Swedish squadron didn't have much consequences, the fact that over 70 Russian galleys had run the Swedish blockade at Hango and reached the archipelago sea had. This also opened the coastal seaway for the Russian transports. A Russian galley fleet under Admiral Apraksin started from Relax on the 1st of August to sail towards Abo, from where he continued already on the 5th of August towards Åland. By the 8th of August, Apraksin reached the east coast of Åland, triggering Swedish withdrawal from the islands. On the 13th of August, whole of Åland was under Russian control. As the Swedish battle fleet prevented Apraksin from reaching Sweden, the galleys were diverted to support the Russian army fighting along the coast of Gulf of Bothnia, with small squadron plundering and razing the Swedish town of Umeå on the 18th of September. The presence of the Russian galley fleet on Bay of Bothnia forced the remnants of the Swedish army in Finland to hastily withdraw to Torn River to avoid getting encircled. Legacy. Russians later embellished the description of the Battle of Gangut by reclassifying the oared flat-bottomed gun Pram Elefanten into a full-sailing frigate. The battle was the first major victory of the Russian galley fleet, and is occasionally as such compared by Russians with the Battle of Poltava. The victory is even nowadays celebrated by the Russian Navy, which has a long tradition of always having one vessel named Gangut. The first series of dreadnought battleships for the Imperial Navy was also named the Gangut class. The first monument to commemorate the Russian Navy, a wooden cross, was erected on the site in 1869 by Rear Admiral Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov, also known as a famous Russian composer. The wooden cross was replaced by a more permanent stone cross in 1870 by the order of Tsar Alexander II. Related battles. Battle of Grengam was fought on the same day 6 years later and marks the end of Swedish supremacy in the Baltic waters. Battle of Svensk Sund, Sweden's most ambitious attempt to regain supremacy in the Baltic. Bibliography. Mattila, Tarpani, Meri me amateur Varna, Sea Safeguarding Our Country. Javaskila, KJ. Gumara Sosaki Show. ISBN 951-99487-0-8.